Comes from Fifi. Fifi gets the smart speaker. If you have one for us, send it in. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Fifi says, Dear Father Simon and the Confessional Collective, my story goes back to 2004 when sat-navs were very much a new phenomenon in the world of driving. A friend of mine had a relative who died, but I couldn't go to the funeral. I could, however, go to the service the evening before when the body was being received into the church. The church was in the countryside, about 30 miles away, and one that I'd not been to before. I knew that I could just about make it on time as long as I didn't get lost. So my husband says to me before I set off, why don't you use the tom-tom? And I said, what's that, the Anglo-Indian drum that starts in Sri Lanka? Interesting suggestion. No, he said, work gave me one today. It's like an electronic map that talks to you and tells you where to go. Well, this was one of the most ridiculous things I'd ever heard of, but I was happy to give it a go if it got me to the church on time, as the saying goes. We both then went out to the car. He typed the address of the church, plugged it into the cigarette lighter, stuck the tom-tom onto the windscreen. I just watched in awe. My only instructions were not to touch it, to remove it before I went to the church, though obviously those two things go against each other, and wipe off any signs of the round mark made on the windscreen, as it was a sign to burglars that I had a tom-tom, and was therefore prosperous, well-to-do, worth breaking into, and ate hummus.
Yeah. There you go.
To reference to yesterday. Yeah. I arrived at the church with 5 minutes to spare. The tom-tom was fantastic. I wiped the round mark off the window screen and went into the church. At the end of the service, we all queued up quietly in the aisle to pay our respects to the family and to walk past the coffin. The vicar was watchful, curate also. The church was quiet, very respectful. There were tears, of course. Everyone was solemn. As I approached the coffin, a very strange thing happened.
Oh, no.
Out of nowhere, a voice boomed out, "You have reached your destination." Everyone looked at me in disgust. I had no idea no idea what the voice was, where it was coming from. I mean, I put my handbag down. It seemed to be coming from there. And I turned to stared back at the queue, looking innocent. I thought I might have got away with it. When I reached the coffin, the voice goes, "Make a U-turn. Turn around if possible." And then again, "You have reached your destination." Well, I realised by then it must be the tom-tom in my bag, and was horrified. It was obvious no one else in the church had one, and thought it was some kind of bad joke, though they hadn't heard one either. They thought I'd made the recording on purpose. From the looks I was getting from the clergy, they all thought I was, 1, disrespectful, 2, denying the existence of heaven. Final destination indeed. I think our Lord will have something to say about that. I could tell that's what the vicar was thinking, even though he said nothing. Pursing his lips like that, as did the curate. Anyway, I scurried out of the church and drove home. I was under strict instructions not to touch the thing, so, and it tried to take me back to the church for the whole journey. Anyway, when I got home, my husband said, "How did you get on with the tom-tom?" Well, Simon, I simply can't tell you what my language was, because it isn't fit to be repeated on your show. And then Fifi says, "It's obvious who I need to apologise to. To this day, the family don't know it was me." I mean, I would have thought it's definitely the woman with the tom-tom in the handbag is what I think most people would have concluded from that. Anyway, a surreal combination of a tom-tom and a funeral. Back in the days when people did not know what tom-toms were actually going to do. Sister Susie from the pub.
Well, Fifi, that really made me chuckle. And I don't think you're the only one it's happened to. Now, I would say it's probably your phone or your smartwatch that starts talking at inappropriate moments. We've all been there. And also, I just love that you just did not think to turn it off. Just turn it off before you go in.
You wouldn't think. You just
leave it in the glove compartment.
She was told not to touch it.
But she took it in her bag. But yeah, no, I'm going to forgive her because, you know, I had a tom-tom that someone had programmed to speak like Yoda.
Oh, really?
Oh, no. That get intensely annoying after 10 minutes.
Yes, it was. So I forgive Fifi.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, we are squarely in Derek Nimmo territory here, aren't we? Yes, 70s sitcom with the tom-tom. I'm definitely going to be. I remember being massively excited when we got sat nav for the first time, and we went on a journey, and it involved going on. I think it was the M6 toll road, which had only just been built, and the tom-tom had no clue and thought we were driving through fields. It was superb. So yes, you've reached your destination. Well done. I love it. Definitely forgiven.
Dear Father Simon, the Consider Collective, and Contrary Matt. This shameful story takes place in the early 80s in a Yorkshire coastal town where actually there's a requirement for a Yorkshire accent, I'm afraid.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, we'll look forward to that one
in
then.
A Yorkshire coastal town where all the boys sported Kajagoo mullets and the girls cultivated their Kevin Keegan perms. I was in the sixth form when our headmaster announced there would be a special evening to celebrate the 50th anniversary of our school. He'd managed to elicit the attendance of Mr. R.M. Littlewood, MBE, an extremely eminent educationalist, and consequently wanted to impress him with the best show ever. Ever. The crux of the evening would be the presentation to Mr. Littlewood of an expensive, personalised plate from the local pottery and an amazing 50th anniversary cake baked by our domestic science teacher, Mrs. Tipping. Well, you can tell there's a couple of stories waiting to be told right here. Whilst the plate seemed an excellent idea, there was some anxiety about the cake. However, there was a general faith that all would turn out well on the special night. So the fateful day arrived with an excited, anticipatory feeling in the air. Bunting was going up, armies of cleaners were wiping and sweeping, and chairs and tables were being carried out of the assembly hall. Mrs. Tipping was beavering away on the cake, which seemed to be taking on Romanesque proportions, with sugared pillars emanating from a decidedly alcoholic fruitcake base. Amongst all this frenetic activity, myself and another sixth former, Steady Eddie, had been called to the head's office, and he delighted in telling Eddie and myself that we'd been selected to make the grand presentation to our esteemed guest. I was to say a few words and hand over the personalised plate, and then Steady Eddie would present the cake. He handed over a little speech that he'd written for me to memorise, and then told us a reporter from the local newspaper had arrived and was waiting to take a photo of us. Under the sharp gaze of the deputy head and Mrs. Tipping, we posed for the photographer, Steady Eddie with the cake and me holding up the completely unique and very expensive personalised plate.
I'm sure this is going to be fine.
Within its ornate presentation box. The photographer was obviously having difficulty getting the plate in the picture because he kept asking me, "Tip it up! Tip it up! Tip it up, boy! Tip!" I was finally holding it at 90 degrees as the photographer took his last shot. Then the plate, graceful and swan-like, dove out of its box and hit the floor, smashing into millions of tiny little pieces. Mrs. Tipping screeched, and the fearsome deputy head vented several rather unprofessional expletives. Thankfully, that's why he or she was a deputy head, so you couldn't make that final step to being the head. Just an aside.
Okay.
Thankfully, the photographer kindly took a lot of the blame himself and promised a front-page photo to try and make up for the disaster. As the deputy head raced back to the pottery to try and replace the irreplaceable plate, Steady Eddie and I returned to the sixth form common room. Before long, the whole place was in uproar as they started to run a book on the chances of me repeating my smashing performance that evening, but unbeknownst to me, even worse was to come. When we all reconvened at school a few hours later, for the big presentation, I've never known a body of students exhibit such a complete state of manic anticipation. Every single student seemed to know what had happened, and even the staff were giving me thumbs-up signs and shouting, "Mind that plate, young fella," because they all said that in the 80s in Yorkshire. It had been very hard to memorise my speech given the concerns I had about keeping a piece of china between my hands, and I felt hot, sweaty, and under immense pressure. Finally, the time arrived, and Steady Eddie and I went backstage to collect the now completely bog-standard plate, as there'd been no time for any personalisation, and the amazing sculpted cake. It was covered in 50 candles, and myself and Eddie walked deliberately, slowly, across the length of the hall. During that walk, you could have heard a pin drop, and even the titters had been stilled as the sixth form drew a collective breath to see who would win the sweepstake. But, Unbelievably, when I reached the stage and the top... It's quite a stressful confession, this is. The top table, seating the headmaster, Mr. Littlewood MBE, the town mayor and other dignitaries, I managed to deliver the memorised speech and present the rather cheap-looking plate without breaking. I was so relieved to get this over and done with, I quickly and forcefully stepped back from the table, just as Steady Eddie was stepping forward to present the magnificent, turreted, shiningly lit 50th birthday cake.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I stepped back with enough vigour and close enough to Eddie's side to pull back the left side of his unfastened blazer. The blazer opened wide, his tie slipped out just as he leant over to deposit the cake on the table. Eddie's hauntingly memorable words were delivered in a broad Yorkshire accent.
Yes.
To the hushed masses of over 1,000 staff, students and parents, something like, "Bloomin' heck, me tie's on fire!" As the...
I didn't think you were going to do it.
I did.
Oh, superb.
I did.
Yes, you did.
I did. It was required. It's in the stage directions. Apologies if it was way off. As the flames... Basically, his tie's on fire.
Yes, we got that.
As the flames shot up his tie, not so steady Eddie desperately raised his hands to start batting out the flames, consequently dropping the cake with all its turrets heavily onto the table. Far too delicate for such a clumsy delivery, the cake broke and the pillars fired off in all directions, but mostly forward onto the occupants of the top table. I don't have too much recollection of my hasty exit off stage, but I do remember seeing half the cake in Mr. Littlewood's lap, the frantic face of the headmaster with traces of marzipan over one eyebrow, and the slumped and wailing figure of a totally devastated Mrs. Tipping. I also recollect a series of sixth formers laid on the floor in uncontrollable hysterics, having quite literally fallen off their chairs with laughter. As you would. So from whom do I require forgiveness? Well, not from the head, as if he hadn't been so pretentious in the first place, I wouldn't have had the chance to ruin his evening. Neither from Mr. Littlewood, as at least he got a plate and half a cake out of it. No, it's Eddie's life that I ruined, as he hadn't realised it was my fault that his tie had been released, and so the flak was all his. Whilst my poor performance with the plate was completely forgotten in the ensuing cake gate backlash. Eddie got into trouble with the staff, his parents couldn't bring themselves to speak to him for weeks afterwards, and the ribbing he got from his fellow students, which included Eddie's photo in the local paper being defaced in the way that only school kids can, would have quite frankly broken anyone. I hope you feel magnanimous, says Slow Coach. Well, it was a bit of a disaster from start to finish, really. But anyway, Mr. Littlewood got his cake, and everyone was okay in the end. Sister Bobby, what do you make of that?
This is lovely. I loved this. I was surprised, actually. I thought something else was going to happen. So, Slow Coach, is really easy to forgive you, because I don't see any of this was your fault. No one delivers a two-tier cake like that. You put it on a surface, you go, look, and here's the cake. You unveil it, or you do something. And also, you don't move a lighted cake either. It can be dangerous. So I don't think it's your fault.
Saying tip it up.
Well, yeah, the plate's not your fault. The cake's not your fault. I do feel sorry for Steady Eddie, who nearly caught on fire. I mean, that's really dangerous, so you've got to be careful. So really, it's easy to forgive you. This is not your fault.
Brother Matthew.
We are firmly in 70s sitcom land here, aren't we? This is very much Terry and June. I am going to forgive for two reasons. One is your accent, which was hilarious. And the other is that surely this is a design flaw in the tie. Ties shouldn't catch fire. Ties are always going to be near, like, you know, if you've got a birthday cake and you're wearing a tie, and you're probably wearing a tie if you've got a birthday cake, and it's going to have candles on it, so therefore the tie shouldn't be flammable. So it's down to the tie. That's the reason why this has all happened. So
Simon and the Divine Disciplinary Panel, says Yuri. Thank you, Yuri. My sorry story starts on a football tour to Scotland back in the mid-90s. Before I go any further, perhaps I should define the phrase football tour. This was a tour in the sense that the only touring would be from one drinking establishment to another, and would be punctuated by a single football match, where the standard of play from our team would be of the primary school reserve team level. Having endured a tortuous journey from South Wales to the east coast of Scotland in the back of a cramped minibus, my teammates decided an evening sampling the pubs and clubs of the nearby town of Falkirk would set us right. So we duly piled into the back of a couple of taxis. Now, because of the bilingual skills of many of our team members, conversations were often conducted in the language of heaven, or Welsh, as it's also known. A few of us were chatting away when the taxi driver asked if we were from Estonia, who happened to be playing Scotland in a World Cup qualifier in Glasgow the following day. I explained that far from being Estonian, we were a village football team from the deepest, darkest valleys of South Wales. This is Yuri speaking here. and we were on our annual football tour. However, this case of mistaken identity on the taxi driver's part did plant an acorn of an idea in my head. On arrival in Falkirk, we eagerly poured into the nearest bar and discussed such burning issues as tactics for the match and which of Falkirk's nightclubs, the Velvet Rooms or the Moon, we were going to frequent. One of my Welsh-speaking teammates and I were interrupted by a pretty young lady. "Excuse me," she said, sounding exactly like Claire Grogan from Gregory's Girl. Men of a certain age will understand the significance of this reference, and if you need any extra help...
Good. I'm glad we bumped into each other.
That was Claire Grogan from Gregory's Girl, so Matt's obviously got it. But my friend and I, says this girl, my friend and I were wondering what language you're speaking. In a flash of inspiration and conjuring up my best comedy Eastern European accent, thanks, I replied with a flourish, which the late Peter Ustinov would have been proud.
Oh, here we go.
It is Estonian. Oh. Are you here to watch the match tomorrow? She asked excitedly. Noticing how impressed she appeared to be that I was an Estonian fan, I thought I would go one better. No, I replied a little indignantly. We are members of the Estonian...
Nendelis. Yeah, go on.
We are members of the Estonian national football team. Anyway, you get the drift. Or maybe you don't. A puzzled look fell across her face. Oh, you surprised me. As she stared at the half-empty pint glasses that we were holding. Well, if you're playing tomorrow, she says, should you really be drinking? With inspiration flowing as readily as the beer, I explained that both my friend and I had been sent off in our previous qualifying match, a particularly ill-tempered affair played a few days earlier against neighbouring Slovakia, and as such we were suspended from playing the following day. I've since discovered that Slovakia is about 1,000 miles from Estonia. But anyway, don't let that trouble you. As a result, we decided to go against our manager's orders and stay in the team hotel, and had snuck out to enjoy the nightlife of Falkirk. I didn't believe the story myself as the heavily accented words came tumbling out, but the ladies had fallen for it hook, line and sinker. They appeared delighted that they had stumbled on the Estonian equivalent of footballing bad boys George Best and Gaza. As this jape was going so well, I decided to up the comedy value even further at the expense of my teammate. Now, he was something of a suave, smooth talker, and this was the perfect opportunity to leave him speechless, quite literally. Allow me to introduce you to my teammate. This is Igor, I announced,
Igor,
conjuring up images in my head of a half-witted, hunchbacked henchman in the mould of a Peter Lorre character in a Hammer horror film. Forgive him, he does not speak any English. In fact, he has trouble speaking at all. I will act as a translator for you, I added.
Where are we now? I've no idea where the accent is.
Estonia!
It's like southern Italy.
No, it's Estonia next to Transylvania. Anyway, it was Igor that gave me the flavour. So, how was it that I spoke perfect English while Igor couldn't speak a single word, they asked. My imagination was now running amok. I told them that I had honed my perfect English following a big money transfer to Chelsea, and in my spare time volunteered with various animal charities. Igor, on the other hand, I explained, was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. It was his first time abroad, and he was only in the Estonian team because his father was the manager. This generated huge admiration for me and massive sympathy for Igor. The girls were obviously becoming quite interested in their charity-supporting Estonian football superstar Bad Boy and his unfortunate sidekick Igor. Now, this growing admiration posed something of a problem, particularly as Igor and I were both married men in real life. In order to avoid any awkward misunderstandings, I opted to come clean to our newfound football groupies. I'm really sorry, I said nervously, not sure how my deception would be greeted, but actually we've been pulling your leg. We're not really professional footballers from Estonia. We're on a football tour from Wales. Wales? Interrupted one of the girls excitedly. We love Wales. Do you know the stereophonics?
Yes.
Well, funny you should ask, I started.
Brilliant.
Now, Father Simon, I either then said we were two married Welshmen who played for the equivalent of a local village pub team's fourth 11 and perhaps weren't the superstars we made ourselves out to be, or I said I was the Stereophonics manager and Igor was a roadie. I can't quite remember just now. Anyway, I need forgiveness from the two Scottish lassies who I so convincingly duped. They seem to be delighted to have met the Estonian football version of The Odd Couple. Neither do I wish to apologise to Igor, who eventually forgave me for casting him in the role of illiterate international footballer. No, I would like to apologise to the entire Estonian nation for my excruciatingly poor accent, me too, which I based on some kind of Russian version. Although I have since found out that the Estonian language is more closely related to Finnish than the Russian. Anyway, yours hopingly for a lenient yellow card rather than a rash red from Yuri Hudyanikagolov is how he sounded. Anyway, well, let's just check in then on the forgiveness stakes from the juggernauts of justice. What do you say to Yuri, Sister Bobby?
Well, the thing is, there are many points on this, but Yuri, you're such an idiot. Because being Welsh was enough. I know many a woman that would fall over, and a man actually, that would fall over for even the slight lilt of a Gaelic accent. So being from Wales was enough. You didn't have to be from Estonia. So you're a big twit for that. But it's funny because you talk about confessing. You confessed to the girls that you were from Wales. You didn't confess to the girls that you were married.
Well, I think clearly there was. I don't think there was anything to confess to, in as much as they just had some.
Yeah, but they were having some fun.
Chatty fun.
Yeah, chatty fun. But we forgot to say, actually, we're really from Estonia. We won't tell you that we're still married. We'll tell you we're from Wales. So I'm going to say that, Yuri, completely unnecessary. And no, you're not forgiven.
Not forgiven.
It's your wives you should be asking forgiveness of.
Brother Matthew.
I think the accent alone means this is going to be the best one we do this week. That was absolutely superb. And the masterstroke there is not only having done the accent and then saying you're footballers, but to say, oh yeah, and I do a lot of work with animal charities as well.
That's right.
Oh yeah. So I love that, but I think really should have kept it going. I mean, obviously keeping it classy and above board and all those things, but you should have kept it going. So for that reason, I'm not going to forgive, but superb.
Father Simon and the Friendly Forgivers. My sorry tale begins over 30 years ago when I'd started my first job after leaving sixth form. My job was in a warehouse, and it was mainly picking orders and putting them up ready for delivery. Apart from this, we had a stream of deliveries coming in, and therefore goods to be put away. A fair amount of this involved using the forklift trucks, which were there. Now, our forklift trucks were what are known as tilt and balance forklifts. They had, it's quite a specialist here. I mean, do you know about this?
Completely out of my depth.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Could you not pimp one and then...
I'm sure you could, but...
Put some spotlights on it and go, hey, look at me, and then do wheelies and stuff?
Well, yeah, you could do all sorts of kind of folk art over it and make it look nice, but very little that you can do. You can't lower it or...
I don't think there's much... Is there a crossover between folk art and the forklift truck?
Well, we'll find out, I'm sure, when someone texts in.
I'm sure they will. Anyway, so we had tilt and balance forklifts. They had automatic transmission, and so had only two pedals, a brake and an accelerator. Now, if I can say, I had become, in a relatively short time, quite proficient on these forklift trucks. And forklift truck drivers, I knew, earned generally a lot more than others if you get the employment going in the factory. So work had become a waiting game. In my head, at least, I imagined the day would come soon when I could go and get myself a new job as a forklift truck driver proper in the real world and earn some serious money. Many an hour spent daydreaming about how I'd spend my money. Then one day I was standing on the loading bay talking to Reggie, the older guy who ran the trade counter. You know Reggie. Here, he says.
Oh, yeah, Reggie, yeah.
I don't know why you're working here, my lad. Not now you can drive them forklifts. You should be earning 3 times as much as what you get here.
Shut up.
You should shut up and get out. I know, Reg. Well, I'd like to get a decent job. Well, let me tell you, says Reg. My son-in-law can get you a job, kid. He's the warehouse manager at United Ceramic Tiles in Amblecook.
Amblecook?
Have you heard of them? No, I haven't, Reg. Oh, they're famous. I'll have a word with him. He can get you in there, no worries. Oh, well, thanks, Reg. Anyway, true to his promise, he really did talk like that.
Yeah.
Reggie actually did have a word, and I had a letter through the post arranging a job interview for the following week, which Reg said was merely a formality. So the day arrived, and when I got there, I was met by Reggie's son-in-law, who spoke well. Oh, okay. Disappointing. It made me feel comfortable right away. Well, Reg has told me quite a bit about you, says his son-in-law, so I think you'll fit in great here. Things were looking good. We'll start you on a wage, 180 quid a week, with a review after 3 months. Put you on the same wage as the rest of the boys then. Well, Father Simon, things were looking very good. 180 quid to start 30 years ago.
That's not bad.
That is pretty good money. Rightio then, says Reggie's son-in-law. Let's get you on one of the trucks. Let's see what you can do. I presume you've driven reach trucks before, haven't you? Hang on, I'm thinking. Reach trucks? What about the tilt and balance with all that folk art? What does he mean, reach trucks? Did he mean the other sort of forklift trucks, the ones I'd seen where you sit sideways on that? Anyway, maybe that's what he meant. Yes, that has to be it. It's a sideways on thingy. Because I was quite technical, says Chris. Everything else should be the same, shouldn't it? So we put on our safety helmets, and off we went into the warehouse. Oh my, there they were. Sideways on thingies, forklift truck type machines. And look how tall the racking is. 5, maybe 6 shelves high. Each shelf holding or having enough space to fit a whole pallet full of ceramic tiles. Each worth quite a few quid. The forklift truck was an awesome, massive beast. My first reaction was total terror. Then I climbed onto the beast. Hold on a minute, it's got 3 pedals, and not 2. What to do? Should I ask him?
No.
What do you think he did?
He didn't.
Obviously he didn't.
I decided to bluff it out. Maybe
Yeah, of
not
course.
wise, as at this point in my life, I had never taken any driving lessons. I should probably mention that as well. But I turned the key, and it went on. So far, so good. I then put my foot down to the floor on the pedals that I thought were for the clutch and the forward gear, but unfortunately, it was actually backwards and accelerator full on.
Good.
Reggie's son-in-law just about avoided getting crushed to death as the forklift truck shot backwards at what felt like 100 miles an hour and then slammed into the wall, breaking through it with a crash that would have raised Lazarus. Bricks and mortar were flying everywhere, and daylight entered the warehouse through the plaster dust. I'd also hit a steel supporting beam, and by now the whole warehouse was shaking. I was dazed for a few seconds, but quickly realizing I was in danger of being crushed by collapsing shelves, it's like a Bond movie.
Yeah.
I took my foot off the wrong clutch and put it on the other wrong clutch. Now the truck lurched as the wheels span before shooting forward again, felt like 100 miles an hour. Now the truck hit the incredibly tall racking right on a corner stanchion, and there were whole pallets full of tiles raining down everywhere and on everyone's head. But they had their helmets on. Frightened screams were coming from behind the racking I'd just demolished, but thankfully these were just screams of fear, not pain. I saw Reggie's son-in-law, but even if I'd wanted to look him in the eye, I couldn't have, as he was covered in dust and broken tile powder and cowering behind another set of racking. I got off the beast without even attempting to shut off the engine, walked over to Reggie's son-in-law. I took off my safety helmet. There's a very strange reaction here from Chris. Well then, I said, as tiles continued to fall down. I'm off then, mate,
Yeah,
I said. As I was marching swiftly to the door, I could still hear the revs whistling away as tiles fell everywhere, and the racking noisily gave up and fell down too. By now, clouds of dust were billowing throughout the warehouse. Clearly, and obviously, I need forgiveness, not from Reggie, who is no longer amongst us. Oh, right. Or from Reggie's son-in-law, who is... who, had it not been for the disastrous demolition job I did on his warehouse, would surely have given me the job that would have changed the direction of my life, says Chris, who sounds they might regret this. Father Son asked for forgiveness from the regular guys who worked at United Ceramic Tiles in Ambicate back in the heady days of 1984, who would have had to sort out the mess that I had made of their stock and their warehouse, or, frankly, what was left of it. So the destruction in this, I mean... different tales are famous for different things, but the amount... I can't remember a confession with greater amounts of destruction going on, because that sounds like hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of damage. And he gets off the forklift and goes, all right, then I'm off.
Bye.
Hang on, mate. I think you owe us a bob or two. Sister Bobby, always mature and responsible.
Yeah, Chris, it's going to be really easy to make this decision because even though things were different back then, they were different times. I'm sure health
Bobby,
and safety, they were visiting back then. And I'm sure you had to have certificates. So the only thing I can't work out is why the brother-in-law wasn't a little bit more, son-in-law, fastidious about checking your tickets or checking your certificates. And also, the other thing is...
It is his fault. It is the son-in-law, really.
No, it is actually Chris for bluffing, because that's the problem. When you bluff and go, yeah, this will be all right. This is what happens when you bluff. This is like getting into a car you don't know, assuming everything is in the normal place, and then, of course, you've turned left with your indicators. That's the very minimum that you can do. You should always, basically, familiarise yourself with the equipment. That's what I'm surprised that the son-in-law didn't do. Don't know his name. But it's still not his fault. It's Chris's fault for lying about it and pretending he could do something, because actually it could have been so bad. I'm so cross about this. You know, we could have had much more destruction. So, Chris, you were very, very lucky it wasn't worth. You are not forgiven
She's
for
getting
bluffing.
quite cross with you, Chris.
Yeah, not forgiven.
Thousands of pounds worth of damage here. Matt, what are you
Well,
saying?
yes. I mean, obviously what Bobby says makes total sense.
However...
but that said, 180 quid a week. Wow. And it's going to go up when I've had my 3-week review. I think I would have probably just brazened this out. I'd have said, oh, looks like the pedals are in a different position to the ones I'm used to. Maybe you should, son-in-law, tell me where the pedals should be. And I'm sure this will all get sorted out. Can I help with clearing up the tiles? 180 quid a week. Yes, I think I would have brazened this one out. So I am not going to forget.
But he says, Dear Father Simon and the Confessional Collective, events surrounding my confession happened when I was asked to fill my dad's car full of petrol at a garage. I mean, nothing strange about that. Something Dad has been asking their kids to do for decades. So the usual negotiation goes like this. I say, I will, for one of those big Cadbury's chocolate bars. He says, deal. I say, and 20 Rothmans and a box of matches. He says, no. Smoking very bad.
Yeah.
Never ever do that. And anyway, he says, it's payback for the endless years of school runs, sports clubs, and drama clubs. Before Matt gets annoyed, I don't like the theatre really.
Good.
Sounds funny. The theatres need all the help that they can
Obviously
get.
they are.
Yeah.
Anyway, this was match day at our nearest football team, who happened to be the world famous and loved by some Manchester United.
Okay.
And we are only a couple of miles away from the ground. Now, this was before sat-nav and before mobile phones, so drivers had to use a map book or an A to Z. They actually had to work it out for themselves. Imagine that, kids.
Yeah.
Not being told to turn left at the next roundabout. You have to work it out before you leave. So this Saturday afternoon, United are playing at home. Some southern team of losers and jesses, I think. And my dad says, go and fill the car with fuel. Great timing, Dad, I'm thinking. It's match day. So I remonstrate with him for a bit. And I tell him I won't be able to repark, obviously, when I come back, because the road is used for match day parking and always fills up with United supporting gentlemen and ladies in their large cars. So I drive the car to the petrol station to fill the car with the fuel. That's the third time I think he's mentioned that. Eventually, he's actually done that.
Good.
He's actually
gone
finally
now.
bought the fuel. It's in the car.
Great news.
I then noticed a coach pull up and a very distressed driver get out. After the blue air had finally cleared, the driver asked me the following. Hey, mate, he says. He's a Londoner, fortunately. I'm lost and the passengers are getting tricksy. United fans from London, you know. Do you know a quick way to the match? Well, I thought for a second and I said, yes, I do. He says, do you live around here? And I said, yes, just round the corner. So I took a look at the bus and it was filled with fans, a singing and a shouting. So I said, what you do is you take this route and you'll have no problems getting to the match. You'll miss all of the traffic. I gave him detailed instructions, even jotted them down on a piece of paper. The driver was well pleased. Here you are. Thanks for your trouble, Gov, he says, because as I mentioned before,
Yes, he's from London.
He's from down south.
Yeah.
He just touched his peak cap and he was off. He handed me a couple of quid. Anyway, he filled his coach with petrol and off he went. Car full of petrol, as I think.
I believe, we might have touched on that. Yeah.
Freddie might have mentioned. I paid and headed home. Amazingly, I did manage to park outside my house, even though it was rapidly filling up with United supporters' cars. The parking gods had smiled upon me and were laughing as hard as I was. That is because, I have to tell you now, I had given the driver instructions to Main Road.
Oh dear.
Which is Manchester City's ground, and not Old Trafford, the home of Manchester United. I've always wondered what happened, what became of the already furious coach driver, now £2 lighter, and what the outcome was, what his passengers said, and whether he got a tip at the end of the day. So if you were the driver of a coach and you refilled at the petrol station on Wilbraham Road in Chorlton-cum-Hardy, I was the person who gave you the wrong instructions. I hope the United fans weren't too heavy on you. I seek forgiveness from the coach driver and hope he didn't get too much stick from the United fans that he was taking to what he thought was Manchester United's ground. There is a moral to this story, says Freddie, and the moral is this: never ask a Manchester City fan where Manchester United's ground is.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's what you have to remember. And that's where, and I mean, obviously, poor coach driver wasn't to know, because all we know is that Freddie was at the petrol station.
Was he filling his car,
filling
though?
his car
That's what I
up
want to know.
And getting a bar of chocolate, but no fags.
No.
Sister Susie, the voice of responsibility and moral authority from the
Well,
pub.
Freddie, do you know what? My dad would never forgive me if I forgave you, because he is a Man United supporter, and even though I don't really care about football, he would not speak to me, because think of all those people who went to see the match. Did they even make it? Had they wasted all their money? But the more stick I've got with Freddie is who goes out to fill the petrol on a special trip to fill the car with petrol?
I do that all the time.
There you go, quite a lot of people.
Yeah.
Really?
Fill the car, check the tyres, all of that.
You wait until the petrol is almost empty, and then when you're driving somewhere...
Nice little trip, Susie. Yeah.
What you do
You
is
get the petrol on the way.
You wait until it's match day, and then you say, bar of chocolate, no fags, a lot of petrol 4 times.
So, I don't think you didn't need to make a special trip. You lost your parking space. You could have got when you were going out the next time. So, for that, me, Freddie, no.
No forgiveness for Freddie. Let's check in with Matthew then.
It would be far too easy to make some very weak joke about how all the Man United fans are coming from London. And I'm going to step away from that gag.
Yeah,
because it'd be far too easy. Really, the driver should have known where he's going, shouldn't he? Should have known where you were going, sunshine. Looks like it's all on you because Freddie sent you to the wrong ground. Unlucky. So I am going to forgive.
So you are going to forgive. Father Simon and the Collective. Once upon a time, I was working in Russia. There was a beautiful Russian princess, and by some miracle, I persuaded her to accompany me on a trip from Moscow to St. Petersburg. It was a business trip, but I decided to make a long weekend of it, as I'd always wanted to explore the city. We decided to travel by overnight train, and had secured a cabin for the 2 of us. We boarded around 8 o'clock in the evening, and the train was due to arrive the following morning. When we got on board, the kind lady showed us to the cabin, provided us with the obligatory tea from the samovar, checked the tickets, and then explained that she would leave us in peace until the morning. The trip was stunning. It was the middle of winter, so there was snow and moonlight, and what with the scenery and the enticing rhythmic nature of the train journey, plus discussing the state of Russian politics,
Yes.
maybe we didn't get as much sleep
No.
as we should have done.
Okay.
That would be distracting, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
So much to discuss, but look at
and
that snowy scenery.
Rhythmic nature of the train. Yeah.
More tea.
we spent the day trundling around St. Petersburg doing the usual touristy things, and then in the evening we decided to go to the Kirov to watch a ballet. Now, being from Yorkshire, going to the ballet when I was growing up was probably not on the list of usual Friday night activities, but I'd recently started going to the Bolshevik in Moscow, and I really, really enjoyed it. However, this particular ballet, Raymonda I think it was called, was dreadful, and I found about 10 minutes in I wasn't enjoying it at all. I managed to make it through to the interval. Here was where I made my first mistake. I decided to indulge in the traditional caviar on stale bread and a couple of glasses of the rather splendid champagne, and I may even possibly have sneaked a couple of extra glasses to fortify myself for the forthcoming dreariness of the second half.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's first and second half. I'm not sure that's how they...
Yes, it is. It's
how
exactly
they think
how they
of
call it, yeah.
Unfortunately, the auditorium was hot, and it was at this stage that the alcohol, the overnight lack of sleep due to cultural conversations, and the heat got to me, and I drifted off. I was enjoying a particularly pleasant dream involving a snow princess and cultural exchanges when it suddenly turned into a rugby line-out, and I was being tackled illegally by a spear tackle from an All Black. I woke with a start to realise it wasn't a rugby player injuring me, but my Russian princess slamming her elbow into my ribs to wake me up. Oi! That's how she talks.
Okay.
She then... It's a common Russian princess.
Yes, it is, yeah.
She then proceeded to explain loudly that I was an uncultured British peasant whose snoring had brought eternal shame on her and spoilt her evening at the ballet.
Yeah.
She also added some other words which brought applause from the surrounding crowd, who were enjoying this rather welcome addition to their evening's entertainment. We eventually made up and my ribs recovered within a few weeks. Then eventually we moved to the UK together. Now, I'm frequently reminded of by my Russian princess of my previous shame. In fact, for the past 15 years or so, she has repeated this story with great enjoyment to all our friends, all our acquaintances, and even passing traffic wardens. However, what she doesn't know is that on one occasion, when I think she had consumed a little too much tonic water, I overheard her telling a friend that the real reason she was upset at the incident was that my snoring had actually woken her up. And to cover her embarrassment at falling asleep, she had decided to deflect attention by blaming me. Well, do I seek absolution from the masters and mistresses of mercy? Yes, but not for my snoring, although I fully accept that the frequency and volume was offensive, and not for disturbing the audience, for they enjoyed the way I had inadvertently livened up a fairly dull evening. In fact, I don't seek forgiveness at all for anything I have done, but I am seeking forgiveness for something I am about to do.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
How about this?
Okay.
A little bit of Philip K. Dick. This is what this is.
Yeah.
You see, I have devised a cunning plan to avenge 15 years of humiliation from my Russian princess, but obviously I'm not going to say exactly what I've got in store. This means that she'll not be able to pass through a doorway without checking for a bucket of ice-cold water overhead, and she will suspect the provenance of every meal I make for her. Alternatively, I may never do anything, but she will live in fear forever, and this confession itself may in fact be my revenge. She's a keen listener to this particular part of your show, so her knowing that you have pardoned me in advance, hopefully, for whatever heinous revenge I have planned, will add to the anticipation. Alternatively, she may just wake me up in the middle of the night with another rib buster and explain that if I ever wish to continue our cultural conversations in this life or the next, I should cease and desist from any talk of vengeance. Toe rag.
Another Russian phrase.
That's a St. Petersburg expression.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I quite like... So this is very good. So Ian wants forgiveness because clearly he fell asleep at the ballet. Understandable, I suppose, under the circumstances. He'd had a cultural exchange and he'd had a glass of champagne. However, he wants forgiveness, Bobby, for something he's about to do, which is the kind of thinly veiled threat for his Russian princess. What do you say?
Well, before we get to that bit, first of all, Ian, I thought you were James Bond. I thought, wow,
He might
man
be.
from Yorkshire, James. Yeah, but then he wasn't, was he? Because he stuffed it all up by falling asleep in the ballet. James Bond doesn't fall asleep in the ballet. He might, do other things, but he wouldn't fall asleep. He'd be,
right.
he might be busy with work or something. But I'm really impressed, Ian, that you managed to get a Russian princess.
He's always busy with work.
Yeah.
With
You're
work.
busy again, James.
Well, but you managed to get one of these amazing women to come back with you to the UK and still be with you for 15 years. But I'm not going to forgive you for something that you might do to her. I don't think you can threaten this lovely woman, for eternity.
My guess is when he says this confession itself might be, in fact, my act of revenge, I suspect that that's what he means, and he wouldn't commit any of these terrible things in the future, but who knows? Brother Matthew.
Well, snoring in the ballet, we've all done that, or at least wish we could have done. Is it not really my thing? Everyone else loves it. But by the isn't it? It's the Bolshoi ballet, isn't it? It's not the Bolshevik ballet.
just
It's
saying,
a whole different thing, I think that is.
He said he was going to the
Bolshevik ballet
in Moscow.
I'm going to say no. So I think here he's wanting forgiveness for being a prankster in advance, and I've made my feelings very clear on pranksters, frankly. So
the Bolshevik might be a pub.
The Bolshevik pub ballet.
Yeah, I'll just
What?
go down.
Going down the Bolshevik.
See down the Bolshevik, mate.
See, oh, you're doing the ballet again? Lovely. And they're all sounding like that again. So I am not going to forgive because of the whole prankster thing. Not up for that at all.
Get us a couple of pints of green Trotsky ale will you, while you're there.
Green Trotsky.
No?
No.
All right.
Bolshevik ballet.
What did you say?
Bolshevik.
Forgiveness or not?
I said...